Well, good morning, or wait, good afternoon, John Barklow. Welcome to the show. I got my hours all screwed up. I'm still drinking coffee.
Yeah, where I'm living, it's definitely afternoon. I don't know where you're living, but
I don't know where I'm living either. It seems like I'm living in my office most of the time.
no, I
Uh,
hear you. I hear you.
yeah, yeah. I'm in my studio 90% of the time until the kids get home, and then But you've been on before. You and I obviously have history together. We've worked together before, and last time you were on, people loved it, man. People like listening to you talk. I mean, you're an authority, John. People like a good authority.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with that, but I appreciate it. I don't. I really don't, but I appreciate that.
That's all right. You don't feel comfortable with it. How you been doing, man? You've been doing the show circuit, or where you been?
You know, not so much. I've been to a few shows. I'm going to a few more. It's just been a different year for me. I've been asked to give some seminars at some of these shows, so I've never been asked that in the last 8 years. Um, some of that, reason why we might get into a little, obviously a little bit, but I think I just asked a little bit too, just like, hey man, if you guys ever need anybody to, fill a void here or there, and so gave some seminars at Wild Sheep, or gave a seminar at Wild Sheep, given some seminars, a couple days of Pope and Young.
Oh,
So
cool.
my show circuit life's been a little different. Um, and then I just been doing so much on this outdoor class and trying to create educational content.
Hmm.
Um, like I think the next, not this weekend, but the next 3 weekends or 4 weekends after that are like all booked with just you know, creating content for some interesting things I wanted to do in the winter environment that, I'm not going to get to here in another 2 months. So yeah,
Oh,
it's
don't be mistaken, John. The winter's going to last a lot longer than that. Where you are.
it's been a long winter already. I've already been out plowing the road today. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So no, it's been good, but busier than I've ever been. Probably more not happy, satisfied, fulfilled
mm,
as
yeah,
I've ever been. So it's been good.
that's cool. Well, I went to part of your seminar in Reno at the
Oh
Sheep
yeah.
Show, and I've listened to you speak a lot of times, but I'm always impressed with you. You do have the ability to hold a room and to I don't know, articulate things well. Not everybody can do that, Every once in a while you'll go to something like that and you're like, dude, this is dragging. I want to just get up. But you don't want to be the first one to get up. And so,
Yeah, no, for sure.
but with you, people really want to listen to what you have to say. I think partially is because you're a great speaker, but also the material that you are dishing out is really valuable to to anybody, but especially if you're someone that wants to spend a lot of time outside. It's like a never ending labyrinth of information that can help you, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think there's the biggest, I think the biggest reason why is that, I was a professional instructor for, I don't know. I mean, I say 20 years, it was probably a few less or maybe a couple months more, something like that. But, writing curriculum and talking and teaching and giving tests and evaluating people in the field and seeing what their comprehension was and like learning different ways people learn. And so I'm not just standing up there making it up, um, as I go. And so, hopefully some of that comes across when somebody comes and listens, either to a video or a seminar that, there's a little bit of experience behind that. And I never want to, I never want to pigeonhole the information either,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. So I can give my point of view, or I can tell you how I think it's maybe done properly or the best way. But I can also sit there and take whatever experience level you have, or whatever equipment you use, or whatever technique you like, and I can help you tease that out and get the most performance out of however you want to do something. Because I've just seen it done so many ways, and I just
Mm-hmm.
realized that although there's ways I like to do it, and so maybe in some regard I'll say the best, There's really no one right way to do it.
Hmm.
There's lots of different ways. And so,
Well,
I
and
learned a long time ago.
in some cases,
Go ahead.
you're working it out as you go too, right? I mean, it's not like
Well, you
that's
kind of
the
have
beauty.
to.
The beauty of some of these things is like, hey, this is the best thing I've found, but to be honest with you, I'm looking for a better way to do it too.
It's a very dynamic environment when you go outside. And yeah, the reality is, as long as you and I have been doing that and been around people that have been doing it longer than us, I'm still learning. I don't mind telling anybody that I'm still learning, and I could literally
Hmm.
learn from somebody who is doing it day one, because their perspective or their approach may be so different or profound. It may spark something in my mind. Go, man, I never thought about that before.
Right, right,
Let me dig into that. So I think that's what's so cool, is you never stop the learning process.
right. If I sneeze a bunch, don't worry, I'm sick. Hold on. My goodness. Thank you, Hunting Expo, for the bug. Yeah, man, isn't that funny how you can learn from people that just started doing something simply because they have a totally fresh, unbiased perspective, and they're like, "Hey, why would you do that? Just curious." And you're like, "I don't know, just what I've always done." And they're like, "Well, there's a better way to do that now, right?"
It's fascinating though, but I think if you shut yourself off from that and say, well, I know everything and I can't learn anything more, I really do think you're just limiting yourself, right? And
Hmm.
that whatever that growth is. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So when I just kind of want to take it from A to Z here and kind of run through. Obviously we're not going to be able to get to everything today, but let's create a fake person real quick. That's probably
okay,
about 90% of my audience. Uh, I'm a male who gets to go hunting or this big outdoor expedition once or twice a year. I spend my entire year planning, saving, buying gear, shooting my bow, running, whatever, to do this. Start me from beginning of planning my season and being prepared. I think one thing I was reading today that you said is know what to expect and be prepared so that you can focus more on the hunt instead of worrying about unexpected hurdles. So
yeah, yeah.
how do I even start doing that? Let's run through the process.
Yeah. So there's a lot there, and it's really interesting, David, because I think that you and I sometimes take it for granted how we grew up. And even though I didn't have a direct hunting mentor, I had people to help me, like, learn how to start a fire or backpack or whatever. And you had your dad and your family. Um, and so what I've found is when people are getting into hunting, outside of being a child or a young person who has that mentor, we always want to focus on, the weapon and that proficiency with that weapon. Fitness is a huge part of this, and it's a fun part, right? That the purchasing of gear and things like that. But it really, if you think about it, the the weapon and the fitness and things like that, even the gear in some regard, is kind of worthless if you can't go outside and figure out how to move around efficiently, feed yourself, care for yourself, dry your clothes, light your stove, set up your tent, manage your blisters, the whole thing, right? You'll never get to the point where you can pull the trigger or the release on an animal if you don't know how to just live outside. So backpacking is kind of become a little bit of a a lost sport or art. And so what I tell people is hunting season is so short, but the rest of the year outside of hunting season, you have all this time to go and learn and train and explore and test and all these things. And that really is what, to me, makes like the whole season like this very rich experience. Matter of fact, I like to say there is no off season. There's just different times of the year when I'm doing something. So um, I would say that you need to start learning how to do all the things that sometimes people take for granted, even somebody who's starting and doesn't know any better. Setting up your tent, anchoring it, where to put your campsite, how to navigate either with a digital map or a map and compass, which I don't think is too old a skill to learn. Once you start assembling the gear, what are you trying to figure out with that gear? Does it work for you, or are you just buying it because, John says it works and it's the best, but, do you actually understand how that all integrates? And so I think if you understand how to live comfortably outside, and like you're okay with the dark and you're okay, hiking back to camp with a map and compass in the fog, like it's just going to make the opportunities you have that much more effective on animals when you do get those opportunities, because as you and I know, sometimes they're really hard to get. And the longer you can live out there and just kind of like feel good about that process, the more chance you have of finding those opportunities to get success.
Do you think why do we focus so much on our weapon or our clothing, or sort of those more, I don't know, are they more sexy than talking
I
about
think
how to light
so.
a fire and what food we're going to eat? Because it does seem like if you just thumb through Instagram right now, right, and you see what people are talking about, they're talking about their bow, they're talking about their workout, they're talking about maybe what state they put in for, right?
Hmm.
There's not a lot that are talking about how they're prepping their survival gear or skills.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think it's because it's fun, it's sexy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have that instant gratification. Hey, let's go shoot a tack, or
Mm-hmm.
let's shoot in the backyard, or let's go to the range, or let's go to the gym. I think it's a huge mistake, though, if people don't focus on, those other things. I call it the care and feeding of the hunter. So that's what I call it.
Mm.
And, it's something that I taught for a very long time. But if you can't go out there and live, we'll call it self-supported, so out of a backpack, for 3, 5, 7 days, all those other skill sets, the, the physical fitness and the shooting, the calling, whatever, is going to be worthless. The best gear in the world isn't necessarily going to help you if you don't understand it, right? Or the
Mm.
best boots aren't going to work if you don't know how to take care of a hot spot. Or you could have dehydrated food that, everybody promotes, but if you don't understand the calories and how your body assimilates that food to kind of stay on the mountain, then it's all kind of wasted. And so it's like, where do you go and learn all about that? Like, who who talks about that? Who teaches that?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little more difficult because unless you've gone to, like, a Knowles course, or something like that, maybe you had a great Boy Scout, uh, I don't know what they're called, troop chief or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or a mentor, a dad or a granddad. Like, I don't know where you learn that stuff. And so we tend to focus on, it's just like when we go in the gym, right? I always tend to focus on the things that I'm good at, and I
Yep.
and I kind of like dismiss my weakness. And it's like, I'll go out with people and they don't know where to set a camp. They don't know where to find a glassing knob. They don't actually know
Mm-hmm.
how to read a contour line on a map. They don't really know either where to find a water source, or when they do find their water source, like, oh, you mean you actually have to purify it or filter it, or I'm going to get sick? Like, things that people like you and I may take for granted, but um, all those other sexy things aren't going to matter if you can't just go and live outdoors and be comfortable with that in a lot of diverse environmental conditions.
Man, there's so much there to talk about.
I know there's a big subject, but
Yeah, but the the point is the longer you can stay out and stay quote unquote comfortable, meaning not so uncomfortable that you have to leave, or
yeah,
unsafe, um,
correct.
would be the worst case scenario, right? The more chances you have to exercise your more sexier skills, like your shooting or your fitness, or something of that nature, or what broadhead you shoot. None of that, like you say, especially if uh, broadhead or bullet. You spent all year like comparing ballistics and different loads and sighting in your gun. Well, that equates to exactly, like, I don't know, fractions of a second of your hunt. If you shoot once.
Yeah, if
What
you're
about
if you're
what about the
lucky,
other
yeah,
99%?
exactly.
So when you're planning and I just want to be clear, folks, this is none of what he is saying only applies to hunters,
No, not
obviously,
at all. No.
because if you follow John, he'll be backcountry skiing, he'll be doing whatever. These skills should apply, and I think even more in this day and age. And this is why I am going to be trying to be doing a lot better job at even becoming better than I am, because with all that, and I know I'm not a prepper, but my
No,
wife
no.
and I were just talking the other day. It's like, hey, what if we did go to war with China or Russia or both? If you know history, like, war is basically inevitable at some point. It's not like we're going to be able to avoid big conflicts forever. Like, there will come a point, maybe not in my lifetime or your lifetime, but in my kid's lifetime or whatever, where just basic human skills, life skills, will be important. If we lost our electrical grid for even just a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, my wife and I were talking about how many people there are out there that simply wouldn't survive. I mean, they might survive, but it'd be on a string. It would not be pretty. And
Yeah.
even someone like me who has guns, ammo, water purification, freeze-dried food, even water. Like, I have, let's just call it, maybe 50 or 60% of my bases covered. I'm not an expert on preserving meat. I'm not an expert on starting fire without fire starter. Like, there's a lot of things that even me, who spent my whole life outside, could learn that we should probably, I mean, I know how to do this, but even most people, like, we're all relying upon our GPS and our phones, right? What happens when that goes to shit? Or, maybe even for hunters and backpackers, I mean, it goes to shit all the time. Your phone doesn't work most of the time. So knowing these skills goes far beyond just your adventure. It's just a good skill to know and pass on to generations so we don't forget this shit, right?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up. I talked about this, I don't know, a month ago or so, but it's been a tough winter in a lot of parts of the country, right? So just look at natural disasters, be it a snowstorm knocking out your power for 3 days in the cold, or a hurricane, ruining the water system and maybe, putting a hole in the roof of your house. Um, Backcountry travelers, I'll say, and not just limited to hunting, we have the skills, the knowledge, a lot of times the tools to be able to not only help ourselves and our families, but even our communities, right? So
Mm.
if somebody's in their house dying from the cold, from exposure, like, it's so horrible to hear those things, because you're like, man, they probably had the things in their house to help them survive, but they didn't have the knowledge to apply it. And so if you
Mm.
extrapolate that into going out in the backcountry, where you're purposely putting yourself in this limited resource scenario, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand those things. And so to me, it doesn't matter if you're like learning to shoot a pistol or, skydive or backcountry ski or whatever, like, it all comes down to the basics. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, can you dry yourself out? Do you know how to warm yourself? Do you know how to feed yourself? Do you know how to get water? Just the basics of life.
Mm-hmm.
I think people should at least make sure that they're understanding those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the same time that they're, shooting their bow, shooting their rifle, uh, going to the gym, whatever. Altitude is one that, over the last couple of years, I mean, I've seen it, unfortunately, for, a couple decades, just with myself or friends, and having real bad situations. We've had a couple guys I know just in the last couple of years that I've even talked to them about this, and they go to higher altitudes to hunt, mule deer or something like that, and it just brings them to their knees, to the point where they become almost a casualty and need to be evacuated off the mountain by friends or
Mm-hmm.
search and rescue groups. So all these things are just really important to understand, and put in your quiver of knowledge and skills. Like, I like to say, knowledge weighs nothing, right? All it costs is basically time to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
So the more knowledge you have, the more you're able to go out there with less resources and still be able to not just survive, but thrive. That's really what we want to do. We're going out there to have fun. Yeah, sometimes it could be type 2 fun, but it's still fun. when we go out there, and it's even funner when we're successful and like kill an elk, right?
Yeah, and you'll talk to like the guys that I respect the most that I think are the best backcountry hunters. Specifically, my friend Ryan Lampers. I asked him one time. I go because he'll stay out for even sometimes solo for 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's a long
and,
time.
and he
It's
may
a
come
real
back
long
to the
time.
truck a couple times, but he doesn't really leave that mountain range.
Hmm.
There was a scenario a couple years ago for Nevada mule deer, which I think is like in some of those higher elevation early season hunts when it's hot and you're hunting at 10,000 feet. Like I know wintertime hunting's not fun, but if you ever done one of those early season hot desert high elevation hunts, those things absolutely kick your ass. Like you can't drink enough water. There's no flat place to sit. The sun exposure is nonstop, et cetera, et cetera. If you can, like you said, thrive in conditions like that for multiple weeks. Anyways, my point was, I asked him how he does that, or I said, what did I say? How do you keep from suffering? He goes, I don't suffer at all. I don't, I have my system dialed to where I actually would rather be back there than in my own bed. Now, I think that's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but
I hope so.
but but he has figured out his system. He's dialed it in so much, every square inch of his backpack and the things in there, he knows, and he's totally at peace in any condition, whether it's a blizzard or 100 degrees, whatever. He knows he's going to be fine. He knows how to deal with problems. He knows how to fix things. He knows how to find water. He knows how to, how many calories he needs and all these things. And there's like peace of mind to that, because I've been in this situation, and I'm sure you have too, John, and I see it all the time where people leave the backcountry early, not only because they're not comfortable, but also because they don't feel safe. Like they're like, we better get out of here. This is not,
Right.
it's not smart to be back here anymore. And sometimes that may actually be the case, but I would bet most of the time that maybe there was another precaution you could have taken that wouldn't have cost you that whole trip to leave early.
Yeah. No, Ryan's a true master, and that's why he's been, I would say, so successful hunting, because he's able, if he needs to stay 3 weeks on a mountain to find that animal, right? And find that success. And, the people you talk about, and listen, I've been there, that have been pushed off the mountain prematurely. It's not because their weapon wasn't shooting straight. It's not because their fitness wasn't there. There was a lot of other things, and a lot of it comes down to they just weren't comfortable in that environment, living in that scenario. I'd much rather live outside in the cold temps than those early season scorching hot temps you described, right? Um, but I understand, okay, here's the problem. Here's what we're trying to solve for, right? We need to hydrate. We need to stay out of the sun. We need to move early and late. We need to, manage our energy and stuff like that. And then you feed yourself, and that's how you do it. And so I just think we need to spend a portion of our year, and like I said, the vast majority of our year is not hunting. I think we need to spend that majority of the year either learning or polishing or improving upon those outdoor skills that are going to help us find success. Like, I'm not a very good whitetail hunter. The only way I'm able to find success in the whitetail woods is, one, being stubborn, and two, understanding how to stay warm so that I can sit in a tree for 10 days if need be for the one opportunity for the buck to walk by. And then I
Mm-hmm.
can put the shooting skills into play. But if you couldn't sit there for 9, 10 days, you'd never get that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why I thought of this, John, but one of the first times I went to jiu-jitsu, I was like just practice rolling with this guy, and he got me on my back, and he in jiu-jitsu, like one of the strategies is if you put pressure on someone's chest or their abdomen, sometimes it'll even make them tap out. But he like laid on me, and he weighed more than I did. And you know that feeling, get the wind knocked out of you, and like your brain automatically goes to fight or flight survival mode. You just want to get out of the situation. Well, in jiu-jitsu, whether you're like getting strangled or you're arm barred or someone's laying on your chest, they want you to feel that sensation. And the first couple times you feel it, you're like, oh, it scares you, right? You're like, oh my God, I can't breathe. But through techniques and a variety of techniques, they teach you to become more comfortable in those environments. Now, yes, you may have to, you should tap out at a certain point, but there's a lot of those situations you don't need to tap out, right? You have you just need to develop the tools to properly get out of those situations, and or just relax yourself and be comfortable in those situations. And I look at the backcountry as no different, right? Like I was thinking, even me this year. So in Colorado, Brett and I were up there at like 9,500 feet in November, and it was like rain. It was almost the last day of our hunt, so we were getting ready to leave anyway. But we had one more half day to hunt, and a windstorm came in, and it was blowing. I don't know. There was gusts 50, 60, and we were in this little hole. But there was like 2 feet of snow, and it was already really cold. The elk hunting wasn't very good, and the trees were like verging on blowing down. And we both just decided, you know what? The risk isn't worth the reward here. It's not like we're seeing a bunch of good bulls. And so we decided to leave a half a day early to get out of that windstorm and it was supposed to stay there for another day. So it really didn't matter anyway. But even me, I found myself that night when the teepee was like, just, feels like there's an earthquake the whole night. Like it's just shaking. It stayed up great, but you were still thinking, God, do I have all the tool? If this thing blew away for some reason, or a tree blew on one of us, or you're like running through all those scenarios. Like, am I prepared for this? Do I have the tools to get through the night with no shelter? Right. And you can't start a fire. The wind's blowing too hard. Right.
Nope. Yep.
And so like, I started thinking about, I've been doing this my whole life, and I started thinking of scenarios that I might not be prepared. I need to learn more and become more comfortable with that.
Yeah, no, it's that's a great story, actually. I would tell you that, if people weren't comfortable like you and Brett and said, man, we just, let's just say in the middle of the night, we're like, oh my God, we got to get out of here, right? Or something like that, you would probably compromise your safety more than just hunkering down, right? And at that point in time during the storm is not the time to figure out like, oh my gosh, I wished I'd have planned better, or I wished I'd have, understood how my clothing system works. And I'm not saying that about you, but uh, but that's when people start getting into trouble, right? Is when they don't feel comfortable and they make one bad decision based on whatever poor judgment, and then that leads to the next, and that leads to the next. And so that seminar I gave at Wild Sheep, it was titled Cold Weather Mountain Survival. Partly because it was kind of a cool title, but really what it came down to is, if you understand your equipment and you've put some preparation and planning into, getting ready for that hunt, and you understand the environment you're putting yourself in, then when, you shoot that bull at last light and you have to spend the night on the mountain because, it's going to take you several hours to quarter it up. And then, it's maybe not safe to walk back in the dark because there's a cliff band, or it's kind of, sketchy terrain around you. And you're like, okay, well, I've got everything I need to kind of sit down, ride the storm out. And maybe it's not going to be the most comfortable night, but it's not going to be I'm pushing the SOS button and requesting help. It's like, no, I'm capable of doing this. And although it's maybe not as comfortable as being in your bed, you are capable, right? And so your capability and your knowledge allows you to do that. And then I think that when you have that capacity, the chances of you getting into a quote survival situation, what I just like to call them unplanned contingencies, it starts to go down a little bit, right? You can manage your risk, you know how to manage yourself, and something that someone may be calling the search and rescue team to come get them, you're just like, well, it's just really more of an inconvenience. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to lose my toes. It's just going to be, a bit of a setback, and we'll get out of here tomorrow morning, or whatever the case may be.
I think it's probably something. I was just trying to think, like, when I've noticed, even myself, people want to dive more into this and learn more and be more prepared. You're either getting older, right? So you've seen a lot more, you made a lot more mistakes. You've had really uncomfortable, borderline unsafe moments on the mountain, which we all have, right?
Yep.
Or you went through something that was like damn near death, like that really scared the shit out of you, right? Like, I think unfortunately for men, like I still know, like I won't even say his name, but we have a mutual friend. We have a mutual friend that spends almost every day outside that still doesn't carry an SOS, like a satellite, a DeLorme or a Spot or anything. And he's out there every day running around in the mountains in the snow by himself. No one knows where the hell in God's name he is. And I'm like, dude, what? Are you freaking kidding me? Just stick a freaking Spot in your back. Oh, the hell, I made it this far. It's like, well, dude, one time you fall and break your leg and no one knows where you are. You're screwed. You're dead. And that's kind of a stupid way to die. So my point is like, it's unfortunate, but especially as men, we almost need a really bad circumstance to kick us into motion here and to learn more, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like to say, about our mutual friend, you can get away with something until the day you don't.
Right.
And the day you don't, you're going to regret it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, listen, I don't want anybody to think that, I carry, a ton of gear with me for every contingency.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you learn, the more you know, the more experience you have, which, you can't buy that experience.
Mm-hmm.
The less you need to survive. So, take Ryan as an example, like he's got his system, I'm sure, right? So he's not overly burdened with a lot of gear, but the stuff he brings, he knows how to leverage to its fullest capacity. And so a lot of that comes from experience.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes from just starting to learn, right? And my point, I'll just go back to, one of my points is we do focus, and I do this as well, right? But we do focus on shooting the bow or the rifle, and it's fun and buying all the gear and this and that. But you also have to understand that the vast majority of what you're doing. So if I kill a mule deer or not on a mountain hunt, let's just say I go on a 7-day mountain hunt for mule deer, I may or may not kill a mule deer. I may or may not ever use that weapon I bring. But I'm going to go out there. I'm going to have to move around. I'm going to have to eat. I'm going to have to drink. I'm going to have to sleep. I'm going to have to dry myself out. I'm going to have to warm myself back up. All those things still have to happen. And so we need to, especially when you're starting out, you need to figure out a way to build those skills. And so that's where in the spring, start hiking to that high lake and going trout fishing. Go on a 3-day backpacking trip. And start out on a trail and then say, well, you know what, we're just going to go 3 days cross country.
What like when I'm going on an adventure, like what are the environmental things that I want to be thinking about when I'm planning for survival and thriving and all these things we've been discussing?
Yeah. So I think weather's the most obvious. So as an example, what's the weather going to be like where you're going? What is the temperature going to be like? It's really difficult when you're sweltering in your garage, packing for a trip, to understand that if let's just say you're at sea level, right? Let's say you're coming from the East Coast, you're going to go to 8,000 feet to hunt mule deer, what the temperature is going to be like at that altitude. And so, as a general rule, if you plan for, let's just say 4,000 or 4 degrees per 1,000 feet of temperature change, like you can start to figure out what that environmental condition is going to be, right? So I find a weather station near Denver, that's 5,000 feet. I get that temperature, I add, I subtract 12 degrees and I start to figure it out. You have to figure out what that weather's going to be. Oftentimes, and you and I have experienced this when you were living here in Montana, that first week of rifle season can often be really brutal up in the mountains. And so it'll be raining in the valley and absolutely dumping snow in the mountains. And if you're not ready for that, if you haven't figured out those environmental conditions, that's where people get into some life and death situations. And so inevitably SAR, search and rescue, is always called. And so you have to figure that out. Let's take an example. You're at 13,000 feet hunting mule deer in Colorado, and you're in a basin that faces east, and you have a big thunderstorm, which often happens in the afternoon, rolls over the top from the west, and all of a sudden you have lightning and high winds, and you could even have snow in August, right? So you need to figure out like when and if those environmental conditions happen, like what are you going to do if lightning hits? Like I was talking to guys in Colorado last year who were going to do that type of hunt, and they're like, man, what do we do? We've never experienced these conditions before, And I'm like, well, You want to get off the tops of peaks. You want to get off ridges. You want to get to tree line if you can, or seek shelter. You want to, lay your trekking poles and your weapons away from you. You don't want to be sitting in a puddle, things like that you need to start to figure out. And then, we've already discussed altitude, which can't be smelled, can't be tasted, but it absolutely can be felt, right? And so figuring out, if, again, let's just use that scenario. I'm not picking on anybody, but
Hey, John,
if
can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
Speaking of altitude.
Yeah.
This is a good moment for me to talk about outdoor class, which John will be premiering his class on, outdoor class, in the next couple weeks. I think it's February 24th. If I'm correct.
Sometime next week. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometime next week. Outdoor class is an amazing place. If you're an experienced hunter or a new hunter, it doesn't really matter. If you want to become better at all the things, whether it's survival or cooking your wild game or calling elk or stalking, whatever it might be, you can learn about it on outdoor class from the go-to experts. And when you go on there, you can get 20% off by using the code altitude. I highly recommend it. It's for everybody, and we all can be better. It doesn't matter. So go check out outdoorclass.com. Use the code altitude for 20% off. And John, we can't wait for your class to come out because we're getting a little sneak peek right now.
I love that. I was like, oh, here's a plug for the altitude show. I love that. No, it's fantastic.
I'm trying to learn from Ben Shapiro. He's the king of that. And I'm not as good at it. I'm not good at it yet, but we'll get there.
No, so let me work this in. So my first outdoor class, which has been a 10-year goal since I left the military, it's called Backcountry Mission Planning. And it's everything outside of e-scouting. I don't talk about that. Mark Livesey is the expert. Go check out his platforms. But basically, it's everything from A to Z. It's from partners, mindset, weather considerations, food, clothing, training, you name it. It's essentially 30 plus years of experience boiled down into 16 chapters. And I'm super fired up about it. And I go pretty deep, just like we're talking. So you come from the East Coast, you want to go to 13,000 feet and hunt that mule deer. I'll walk you through exactly how many days you need to plan, to acclimatize, so that you don't hurt yourself. But these are very important things because you're going to spend a lot of time away from home, vacation, money, right? All these kinds of things. You want to be as successful as possible. You want to have fun doing it. And so that's what this course is trying to figure out. As another example, I'm going to go on a 7-day trip. You and I, we're going to go to 10,000 feet. Let's stop picking on the altitude. We're going to go to 3,000 feet. How much fuel do we need? How long is that going to last us? And that becomes really important when we start going to remote areas where, like I used to up in Alaska, where you get dropped off by a plane, or, somebody drops you off. I won't go too deep into this, but drops you off on the side of the road so you can access into a hunting area, and they're not coming back for a week. You want to make sure that you have enough fuel, right? You want to make sure that you're able to plan those things out so that you're not putting yourself in a predicament. I like to say, I want to leave the mountains on my terms and not Mother Nature's. And so your example of the snowstorm was a little different in the sense that you made a very, I think, wise choice based on a lot of experience and some risk mitigation, which I also talk about, to go, you know what? It's probably not worth the risk to stay here because the hunting's actually not that good anyways. So we're just going to start to extract ourselves off the mountain. That's actually a very mature course of action, right? Anyways, the course dives into all these things in very deep detail. I don't think a lot of what is in that course has been talked about too often, if ever publicly. A lot of this is what I used to teach special operations troops. You're getting a glimpse into that world of the true professional. And so I'm just really excited to be able to bring that, to the hunting industry.
Well, I totally agree with you. It's never been brought together in a course before, and I think we should all be paying attention. So, we're going to continue to pick on that scenario we talked about. We're going to be looking at the weather. We're going to be looking at the altitude. Now, weather's tough though, because in most high altitude environments, weather is completely unpredictable.
Yep.
Unless you have access to, like on my DeLorme, I can look at the weather every day, like specifically for where I'm at. But let's just say you don't have access to that. How does one? Do you just kind of plan for the worst and hope for the best? Is that kind of how you do it?
In some regard, but I think if you just make that statement, it sounds like, well, we're just going to bring everything and hope for the best.
Right.
And I think that's where, like, if you look at a clothing system, which you and I, right, have a lot of experience in that, you want a clothing system that's very versatile, that
Mm-hmm.
adapts to the changing dynamic environmental conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's hot, you know how to use that system for hot weather, because oftentimes, especially in archery seasons, it's like this. But then it could be very cold, and so we want to make sure that we have something to dry out and stay warm, but we
Yep.
also have the ability to maybe get out of the sun and seek shelter. And so what you're looking for is the knowledge and the gear to stay adaptable to ever changing environmental conditions. And as an example, if we are at some altitude and we do start to feel bad, that we understand and know, well, you know what? Let's drop a couple thousand feet, and maybe we don't have to end the hunt, but maybe go look for deer at a lower elevation, right? Until our bodies maybe have that opportunity to get accustomed to the environment, and then we can maybe go back higher a couple days from now, right? So it's just this constant adaptation to a really dynamic environment. But yeah, you can't, just practicality alone doesn't allow you to carry everything you want all the time. So it's like, what do I need? What don't I need? And have I trained with it throughout the year to understand that, I like to say that things should have more than one use. Like, uh, you know, gloves as an example, are just for gloves, but a lot of the things we have can be used for a lot of different things. And so that's how you start to cut down, weight and bulk in your pack, and experience helps with that, and et
With
cetera.
clothing specifically, though, I've noticed that my core system of clothing does not change throughout the entire year. My my there's flux within my insulation and my, not really so much my outerwear. Like honestly, I have, like even from the early season all the way through the late season, I carry the same rain gear every single day, top and bottom. And I know that I'm a wuss, everybody, so I don't really care what anybody else thinks, but I always have a puffy jacket and a puffy pant in my backpack, no matter what, because I know that if I got stuck out with a broken leg, I wouldn't freeze to death, and I could use that as my sleeping bag. Even though it adds like some ounces, I don't really care. But, and that never changes. And then what I do with my clothing specifically is I kind of flex within those are my two most important things. I can keep dry and I can keep warm if all else fails. But I can also use my rain jacket as extra windbreaker. I can put it up on a limb, and like if I don't know, like there's things you can do with the system. But then within that system, I may add more, like another mid layer, or maybe another lighter puffy or whatever. But that's kind of the cool thing about the new technical clothing systems that are out there is you don't need I guess you need a lot of it, but you can cover your basis with a pretty simple system, if that makes sense.
Well, to me, it makes all the sense in the world. And so, I talk about this 8-piece clothing system. I think that most people, most of us can get away with 8 pieces for the vast majority of our adventures in North America, no matter the time of year. And to your point, yeah, maybe my puffy jacket gets a little bulkier and warmer in the winter, and a little lighter and less bulky in the summer. But to me, understanding that shelter is my number one survival priority, so you want to be able to seek shelter, and that clothing is really that first line of defense against the elements, right? So I like to joke, the reason the show's called Naked and Afraid is because if you're naked, you should be afraid. And so that clothing allows you to have that shelter from the elements, and so whatever it is. And then those 8 pieces allow a lot of versatility and adaptability. And yeah, you're right. If you need to, the rain jacket blocks wind, right? The puffy jacket to me is like, I don't go anywhere, no matter what time of year, no matter how far from the truck, I always have some kind of puffy jacket. Because I understand that if I can trap my body heat with that and maybe a beanie, then I can stay warm, right? And if you can stay dry, man, if you got those two things licked, you're going to be able to figure it out, right? So it's super critical that people understand that. And, there's been so many advances in technology and the, more brands than ever building technical clothing systems. I, I don't really care which one you pick. Whichever one you pick, you can figure out how to use to your advantage to help you have an amazing experience out there. And so I talk about the 8 pieces, just as, kind of a slightly broad brush, and then assembling them into a cohesive system that kind of works together. But clothing is absolutely critical. But how often do we train with our clothing? Like nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody. I mean, I'm dumb enough to do it, but part of it's for my job. But like nobody goes out there and says, well, geez, I wonder if these pair of pants will dry if I get them wet. And then the first time they have to figure it out is when they fall out of the raft on a float hunt in Alaska or crossing a log to go bear hunting in the spring. And then they're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like, am I going to dry out? Am I going to freeze to death? And that insets potentially, maybe not panic, but a decision, a series of decisions that may lead to a poor outcome because they haven't figured that out in advance, right? And so again, what are you doing I'll be gracious and say, what are you doing the 10 months out of the year you're not hunting, right? Or the 9 months out of the year you're not hunting? You have all these opportunities to still go out there and have these great adventures and try to figure these things out without the risk of having this, potentially once in a lifetime tag in your pocket and like, blowing the one sheep hunt you'll ever get a chance to go on. Like you'd hate that to be the case. So, the off season, so to speak, or other times outside of hunting are the times to do all these things.
Right. So we've planned for the weather. We got the right clothing system. We believe that we're dialed in that regard. Now, when we're planning, the other challenge that a lot of people have, because it's hard unless you've been to the specific spot. Let's assume you've never been to the spot, is planning for water.
Yeah.
A lot of, especially younger dudes, will be like, I'm just going to go as far in as I can, and I don't know what's back there. Woo! And we'll find water when we get there, and you can do that. But how do you plan for hydration? What are you carrying? Are you carrying a pen? Are you carrying pills, filters, whatever? Just knowing that we don't know where we're going to find water.
Yeah. So water in general is sometimes the biggest crux of a trip. Like you can drop a pin on a map doing your e-scouting. That's the easy part. But can you get there? And then once you're there, can you live? And really a lot of the living, because you're going to carry the food, is the water, because you can't carry all the water. So you have to figure out where you can get water sources, and then, where do you camp in relation to where the water is, et cetera. And then once you figure that out, and speaking from a guy who has had Giardia, and I never want it again, you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to, purify or filter that water? And so generally speaking, if I'm going higher up where the waters tends to be a little clearer and streams run, or there's, melt from a snowfield or something like that, I think a SteriPen's a great tool, right? So super easy, 90 seconds, and boom, liter of water's purified. But if you're a little lower and you're going to be like elk hunting and potentially around, lowlands and wallows and some things like that, where the streams and creeks, and God forbid you have to actually filter out of a wallow.
I don't recommend that. I've tried that.
No,
It's not pretty.
it smells real bad too. But
Yeah.
you have a lot of sediment in the water, and so
Mm-hmm.
you want to filter that out. So oftentimes some type of filtration pump, is a better course of action. So you have to figure out what tool that is. So find the water, and then have just a guess as to what the water source may be like, and then choose the right tool for the job. So its SteriPen is not always the right choice, but maybe a filter is not always the right choice. And so my backup is always to carry some tabs, some chlorine dioxide tabs that, listen, at a bare minimum, I can scoop. I can drop a tab in a liter of water. I can wait the requisite minimum 30 minutes. And at least I'm trying to do my part to, to not get sick or not make myself sick. The good thing is a lot of times you don't get sick while you're actually in the field, but as soon as you come out, you tend to get sick. But this is a critical part of living in the backcountry. And if you don't figure that out, like there's no way to just like be hard and gut through no water. Like you'll die. The general rule is 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water. So you have to figure it out. And when you're putting out a big effort, which every backcountry hunter is, it's absolutely, that's your lifeline to stay out there.
Yeah, and I've found it to be sometimes, especially in those, well, actually all seasons. Like you said, you can find, like there's this basin that we found in Colorado that we really wanted to go. We really wanted to go over there, and I know we would have found water, but I'm not convinced we wouldn't have had to drop a couple thousand feet to get
Yep.
it in
Yep.
2 feet of snow, and there was bowls over there, and it looked awesome. But upon analyzing it for like 2 days with our spotting scopes and binoculars and stuff, and I'm like, you know what? Again, kind of risk mitigation. I haven't seen a bull over there that really triggers me enough for me to take that risk. But that is one of the challenges of backcountry hunting that's constantly a pain in the ass, trying to find good water. Because you might even find water, but it might be just a stagnant pond or something, back there, or a wallow or a puddle. And yeah, you can filter it, but man, it's not like you're going to want to live off of it for 10 days. Like,
No, you're not going to consume what you need, right?
Yeah, you're going to kind of dread it. That's why. What do you recommend carrying in terms of? Do you recommend carrying like electrolytes, like powders and whatever?
Yeah, I think I like to carry some type of
Just something to give it a little
electrolyte.
bit of flavor.
Yeah, one to get electrolytes, and two to just kill a little bit of the not the flavor, the taste, right? The nice thing is like the tabs nowadays and the drops, they don't taste like the old iodine, and it's a lot safer for you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the purification or the filtration filters out some of that sediment and the water doesn't taste as bad. You'll find that with the SteriPen, you don't get any of that, uh, bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think water is oftentimes animals are able to live a very long, healthy life and die of old age with giant antlers on their heads because humans are just not capable of getting in there and staying long enough to hunt them. Um, and I'm sure guys like Ryan and sounds like you figure some of those things out. But if you can figure out, those are big unlocks to certain areas, right? And that's why I prefer winter, because not winter necessarily, but when there's snow on the ground, man, there's water all around me. All I got to do is figure out how to melt it, right? And it
Well, I
turns into
want to talk
water.
about that, but before you get there, though, it's funny
Yeah.
you mentioned Ryan. There is a basin that actually my dad had found in Nevada, and just through conversations, he won't tell you much, but I think I think I kind of figured out what basin he might have been hunting in as well. We were talking about the same one, and I'm like, yeah, but dude, how did you find water? Because that's the only reason I didn't go back there, is because I couldn't find water on the maps. I couldn't figure out how I was going to get water. And he goes, oh, I found it. And I think he just found a little bit of snow or something. But like being resourceful like that is life or death sometimes, especially if you're going to put yourself in these situations. So let's talk about snow. So you haven't found, like, even on those early hunts on the high altitudes, there's still some unmelted snow sometimes, or
Yep.
in the
Normally on
wintertime.
north faces. Yep. Yep.
Yep. So you can melt the snow, but talk us through that process, because I don't know that everybody knows how to do that correctly.
Yeah. So people think that they can just, take their cook pot, scoop up a bunch of snow, turn the stove on, and it'll turn into water. And the reality is that's not true. First of all, snow has a very low moisture content. So you hear about like Utah, the greatest snow on earth, and light powder. Well, there's about 10% of the water, or 10% of the snowpack is water, right? So even like where I came from in Alaska, it was like 12 or 13%. So my point is, if it snows, if it rains 1 inch, it'll create, let's just say, 10 inches of snow, right? So there's not a lot of water in snow. There's a lot of air, and there's a lot of like debris. And so the best way to do it is to put a little bit of water in the pot and slowly add snow. And as you add the snow, at first you'll see that the snow just absorbs that water. And you're like, my gosh, where'd the water go? And you just have to slowly do this. So this is something you have to consider. Not only know how to do that, but if you're melting snow into water, you have to understand you're going to consume far more stove gas than you would if you had a running water source. So I'd always try to find a running water source if possible. But if snow is it, you're going to have to factor in, and there's ways to do it, but there's ways you have to factor in how much more stove fuel I need because, most of us are going to carry dehydrated food. So outside of our snacks, our main meals for the day, if we don't have water, we're not able to reconstitute that meal. We don't have food. So it's really important to understand, how to do that. Now, the nice thing about snow is if you're just trying to create drinking water, you don't have to boil it to purify it. The whole thing, don't eat yellow snow is a real thing. It's good advice. But generally, if snow's falling on the ground, if you scoop off the surface layer, like it's generally not gonna hurt you. You're not gonna get jardy or something.
But it's not 100% solution because you still need
But it's
water
not.
to do it correctly, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's where, like, if you have some water, you can take water as you're hiking, put a little water in an Nalgene bottle, shake it up. It'll start to dilute that snow. You could put the Nalgene bottle in your puffy jacket and use body heat to start melting it. There's ways to do it like that. But you don't have to look as far. And so, like, if you go up to the high country in Colorado or something, if you do go on north faces, a lot of times you'll see these hanging snowfields where you have access to a water source where maybe you wouldn't otherwise. And, a lot of times, depending on the animal you're hunting, that animal has access to water somewhere, maybe not right where you're hunting them, but, so sometimes observing them. But like you said, that water source that they're accessing may not be a water source that is all that appealing, for you and I to access.
Or they might be going further than you're willing to go.
Absolutely is often the case. Yeah.
Depending on the species. I mean, I don't know how they do it sometimes, but sometimes
I don't
they can
either.
go a long time without water if they need to be safe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's really good stuff, man. Yeah, water it's the hardest. I think when you're planning a backcountry hunt, the thing that scares me the most is the water. Even though I know I'll find it eventually, I may have to go out of the basin that I actually want to hunt to find it, and that bothers me. So it's like just keeping that front of mind. And then when I'm hiking around out there and I walk by a spring, I mark it if I know I'm coming back that country or something, just because you never know when you might. Oh, shit. A couple of years ago, I was with Brian Call and my friend Brett back in Colorado. And Brett shot at a bull way down in this basin right at dark, and we thought he killed it. Anyways, long story short, we were several miles from camp at dark in November in Colorado, and we weren't really planning on going to shoot a bull right at dark that night. So we all had like limited water. I think we were all down to like a quarter of a Nalgene, and now we got to drop down another 1,000 feet to go look for this bull. We're going to run out of water. We're probably going to be out there all night. If we find it, we're for sure going to be. I mean, we wouldn't have got back up to the truck till daylight. Anyways, Brian had hunted that country before, and he pulled up his Onyx or whatever, and looked at it. He's like, "Oh, I marked a water source 200 yards below us to our right." And we went and found it, and it was this little tiny itty bitty trickle. Like you didn't even want to touch it because you didn't want to muddy it up. But we sat there by a fire and just rehydrated for like an hour and a half or 2 hours before we went and looked for that elk, because we knew once we got to that elk, there was no, like, we weren't going to hike back there and get more water. So it was like, yes, we wanted to go look for that elk first because we were excited, but we're like, wait a second. Once we get down there and we're down there all night, we're not going to get by on a quarter of an Nalgene packing a whole elk out on 3 people's backs. So that extra planning and always having water front of mind, I think is good. It helps for comfort in the backcountry.
Yeah, no, that was a very smart decision on your guys' part. And that's why I always carry an extra 4 or 6 liter empty bladder with me. So, if I find a water source, I'm gonna take that water if I can before I hike up into my camp. Or If we're all going to drop down, or one guy's going to drop down 1,500 feet to get water, man, take as many bladders and bottles as you can and bring as much water back up. And maybe you only have to go down every 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why I always try to have that extra, bladder just there, because you just never know. I
That's
mean,
smart, and it doesn't
it's a
weigh
big
much.
risk. It doesn't really weigh much. It's worth the weight, whatever the couple ounces
I
is.
don't
It's
know that
worth
I've
it.
been on a backcountry hunt where I would have considered us to have too much water.
No, never.
You're always
Right.
going, how much water do you have? How much water do you have? Do
Yeah.
you have enough for 2 meals tonight so I don't got to walk down there?
Yeah. Alaska, oftentimes you have more than enough, probably too much,
Yeah,
right? Because it's raining on you too. But
true.
but other than that, yeah, it's down here. You rarely have too much.
What about capturing rainwater? Do you ever have you? What's your thoughts on that?
Sitting under a tarp and things like that. I've done it where you kind of pinch the tarp and funnel it, and you can run it into bottles, and then from that Nalgene you can start pouring it in. You have to be a little careful on what coatings are on certain tarps. Like back in the day,
Mm,
there were some really kind of probably chemical coatings you didn't want. But as an example, if you're living in a teepee and we're able to capture water running off the teepee into a central basin, that's a
hmm
really good opportunity to kind of just use the natural effect of that, of that tarp or teepee to capture that. But yeah,
Right.
and sometimes, like, I haven't had to get that desperate, but it's absolutely opportunity where you want to take advantage of if you have it.
All right. So we've got our place. We know the weather. We have our clothing. We've figured out our water situation. Uh, Now we're on to food planning,
Yeah.
which I just wanted to throw something in the mix, John, because I think you're dealing with a lot of men like me who aren't great with details, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm pretty high level. If I'm going 7 days, I just freaking throw together 7 days of food in my back in like a bag and a stuff sack, and I stick in my backpack. I just want to go hunting. Like it's really hard for me to, like Drake does, like put in an Excel spreadsheet and measure your calories and your daily output. I'm like, dude, that is so many details. That makes me
Yeah.
like fall
Yeah.
asleep. But I also know that that's the smart way to do it. Is that what we should be doing? Should we be planning like, and how do we know like how many calories our specific body needs to operate in the mountains? Because it's different for everybody, right?
Everybody's going to be different. And I'm not like Steven, but Steven is a guy that if he doesn't bring enough food, like, he's going to die.
Yeah, because
Where
Steven's like 2% body fat.
exactly. Where if I don't bring enough food, I'm just on a weight loss program, right? Um, so I like to phrase it, food for the backcountry. I call it crisis nutrition, and what that means is you're not going to eat as good in the mountains as you do at home. You just can't carry as much. You're not going to be on the same feeding schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where training throughout the year, be it training for a day or backpacking or whatever the case may be, allows you to start to figure out what your body needs to operate day after day in other than ideal conditions. So how much water, 6 to 8 liters on average, right? That's not ideal, but that'll work. How many calories? I need a lot less than probably you need, right? Where I often find people make the mistake is they do the spreadsheet and they add it up and they're like, I need 4,500 calories, and then they pack it all up. It's way too much. It weighs too much. It takes up too much space. And when they get out there, oftentimes under exertion, especially at any kind of altitude, you kind of feel a little nauseous and you don't want to eat a lot. And so if they haven't tried the food before, and man, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and they're like, yeah, I tried, brand X or Y, dehydrated food, and I got out there and I realized I hated them all. They were horrible. I didn't like them. They didn't taste good. And then they didn't eat it, and all they're doing is kicking their own butt. So I'd say train multiple days with the food you think you'll need. You'll start to figure it out. You can add it up and put it in a spreadsheet if you want, but calories for the sake of calories isn't going to help you. It's the most impactful calories in the most dense food sources you can find, and then try them. So sit down at night and try one of your dehydrated meals for dinner. right? If they don't taste really good in your house, they're not going to taste as good at, say, 10,000 feet, where food begins to lose a little bit of taste. Your palate loses a little bit of taste anyways. I went on a trip years ago where, friends and I were hiking from the south end of Kodiak Island back to the north. It was about 150 kilometers. We were going to do it in like 4 days. And these guys needed a lot more food than me. And so we split all the gear up, but their packs were heavier because of the food. First night we get in this teepee tent. They got all this food. I eat my standard meal. I'm good. They keep cooking and cooking and cooking. At the end of the night, they couldn't eat it all, and so they ended up carrying a lot of. They thought they needed, say, 5,000 calories. They could only really consume 3,000 of what they brought, and they carried a lot of food out of the field, and they never did get the calories they thought they really needed to perform. So it's just to me, it's not a put it on a spreadsheet and go. It's put it on a spreadsheet if you want. Go train with it. Go test it. Modify it, and make sure that it's enough for you to kind of continue, and that you can consume it no matter how good or bad you're feeling. To me, that's more important. I'll eat the same food every single day on a trip, and I don't get bored with it. A lot of people would, but I just know what works for me, right? So as big
Mm.
as I am, and I couldn't even tell you the exact amount. I probably could guess, but uh, I don't eat very much food when I'm out there, just because I'm focused on other things and et cetera, et cetera. But I know it'll sustain me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed there's just so much to talk about here too, right? Like every single person's different. I tend to be I tend to have more energy and I'm more effective if I don't overeat. Um, the other day, this is not a backcountry example, but at home, the other day I was just dragging. I didn't want to do my frickin' mountain tough workout at 4 in the afternoon. It just sounded like absolute hell. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have a snack and try to get some energy. And I just devoured some chips and salsa, which was probably the worst thing to eat. And I did my workout, but I was just ugh. The workout was worse. And then the next day, I'm like, I felt the same way. But I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do this kind of fasted and see how I do this compared to yesterday when I kind of bloated myself, and I was way better. Maybe a apples and oranges type thing, but I have found that in the mountains, because sometimes you're sitting in your teepee at night and you're like, I just feel like eating, and sometimes I'll eat two meals, like two spaghettis and whatever else, and the next morning you wake up and you just feel like shit.
Yeah.
When your body probably would have been okay with stopping at the first meal, and just so there's a balancing act too, because I think you said at the beginning, when you're on these backcountry trips, the goal isn't to necessarily to feel full. Like, you're not going to feel full. You're always going to have that sensation of hunger. Like that's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And so maybe it's better. And I'm just thinking out loud, because I'm testing my body this year with more intermittent fasting, being okay with the feeling of a little bit of hunger, as opposed to feeling like you always have to fix that. And my hope is maybe when it comes around to hunting season, that I don't have to worry about that as much. I can eat the right foods, but eat less. Um, um, I know. So maybe that's also a training thing, just training yourself to feel okay. You don't have to feel, I mean, you don't die of hunger, right? Eat
No.
nutrients, drink water. But you're not going to feel like satisfied. That's why everybody in the backcountry is like, man, can you imagine having a cheeseburger and a beer right now? Because
Absolutely.
your body you're going to be in a constant deficit, but you just kind of learn to deal with that and take the right stuff that's really good for you, right?
Yeah. No, it's super important during this crisis nutrition thing to figure it out for yourself. And so I'm a huge proponent that, not all the time, but I'm a huge proponent of training fasted. So I do it. I do the intermittent fasting anyways, but if I'm ready to eat lunch at, say, noon, and I go for a 2 or 3 hour hike and see what I feel like. What's my stamina like? What's my recovery? Can I keep the same pace? All those kind of things. Or, again, go out on a trip and just bring a menu that you think you would use in the fall, but you're out there fishing high lakes or whatever. Um, and just see how it works. And everybody's going to be different. And one of the last things I'd say about the crisis nutrition is, so I consume caffeine every morning in the form of coffee. I don't stop that when I go out, right? Because I know I like that, and two, my body's used to it, and I don't want to cycle off caffeine. I've seen people have really odd reactions, either to taking supplements, like first day they're going to take a new supplement, it's the first day of a 7-day trip, or whatever supplement they do take. So let's just call caffeine a supplement, and they cycle off and don't take it for 7 days, and then they get splitting headaches or irritable, and it's like, well, that didn't work either. So it's just this constant tweaking. And I know Drake has, that spreadsheet, but I know that we talked about this on a cheap show, but he's got a pretty big menu that he sticks to, and the same foods he consumes. So he knows,
Yeah,
again,
he's
knows
whittled
what
it
works
down
for
to
him.
like a system. He has a
Exactly.
system for him.
That's what everybody
and,
needs. Yep.
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 And I agree. I would rather have the same thing planned every day, and maybe you switch up a flavor here, maybe every other night's like chili this night and spaghetti this night or whatever, just to keep it interesting. But the reality is, I think the biggest hump to get over is realizing you're probably always going to feel a little hungry. You're not going to feel like you're back home with a cheeseburger and fries laying on your bed bloated, right? And you're not going to like be like, oh my God, this is like the best thing I've ever eaten in terms of flavors and stuff. Like you're eating to survive. It's not like you can do the best you can with flavors and you can add little things here and there. But the reality is like you're figuring out what food helps you perform the best, and just realize it's kind of like everything else in the backcountry. It's not going to be luxurious.
No. And the other thing you have to understand is that food not only fuels the body, but food and water just as importantly fuels the mind. And so if you're out there and you're run down and you haven't brought the right diet, and now you have to make a really difficult, precise rifle shot, or you have this unplanned contingency and you have to have really good cognitive function to think your way through and problem solve to get yourself and your buddies back to the trailhead or to navigate, right? If you don't have that cognitive function because your diet hasn't fueled your mind, dude, you're in a world of hurt. And so, we often think about the physical performance, which again is super important, but without the mental aspect of it, like you're just an idiot out there, walking around and can't,
well, and you're making bad
do
decisions too.
You're making really bad decisions.
We don't make good decisions when our mind's screwed up anywhere in life. When we're making, emotional, irrational decisions.
Exactly. Sorry, I just got to.
You're changing your environment right now. We got to do some planning.
I'm plugging my computer in.
Oh,
just because I'm running out of juice a little bit. But,
yeah. Okay, so we have our food planned. Hold on just 1 second. I feel like I'm going to sneeze and I don't sneeze. We've already talked about clothing. So let's talk about, what we all love focusing on, which is preparing our body.
Oh, training.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your perspective on training and what the outlook on that is?
So it's interesting. We're almost coming full circle back to a little bit of what we talked about.
Let's talk about the sexy things now. Let's talk about training, and then we'll talk about shooting.
Yeah, on the first podcast. But to me, you can't train enough. And that's not to say overtrain, but there's, we already touched on it, but there's the physical training. There's the training with your gear. There's, training with your weapon system. There's training with your partners and all that. What I would say is make sure that you're training in a diverse set of environmental conditions. So we already talked about maybe training fasted. Um, we talked about I like to go into the gym and do the things that I'm good at, but how do I shoot? You and I are archery hunters. How do I shoot in the wind? How do I shoot after a workout? Or, how do I shoot after that 3-hour fasted hike? Can I come back and shoot, uh, you know, like I have a 3D course here on the property, but, can I shoot that 3D course as accurately as I could shoot if I was well fed and hadn't gone on the hike? So things called stress courses. I understand that if I have a pack on and my heart rate's a little elevated, that past 40 yards my arrows tend to drop low and left because I'm dropping my bow arm. Like I know this about myself, and the reason I know that is because I've trained, right? And so I don't think that's what I love about this lifestyle that you and I live and so many others is it's a year-round lifestyle. There's always something more to learn. There's always something I can get better at because, one, we owe it to the animals. Two, we just love to do it. We want to find that success. So there's so many aspects of training, but I think you need to make training not always, not every time, but I think you need to make training difficult. I think you need to make training or train in inclement weather and difficult conditions. And I think training with your partners is if, depending on if they're local or not, I think is really important. But when you look at the best sports teams, military units, you name it, the highest performing functioning teams, they are training at some level year round. And so for me, the only way I can, especially as I age or get older, I should say, to me, just continuing to train, even at a moderate level, which is about all I can do anymore, year round, is far more impactful than me trying to ramp up right before, a hunt and potentially hurting myself or, this or that. And like for me, like shooting, I want to make sure that weapon, that bow is just like an extension of my body. So although I'm not the best archery shot, I want to make sure I can be the best at that point in time. And so for me, it's just like, oh, I got to shoot year round. So, training is the fun part because you don't need a tag, you don't need to draw for it, it doesn't really cost a lot. And you can really be very creative and have a lot of fun with it. But I think to the success of your hunt, I think it's just super, super impactful and cannot be overstated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you look at training as like I wasn't even when I originally asked the question, even in my own mind, I was thinking of like physical training, right? Like training, like working out.
Yeah,
But I like your point of training is much broader than that, and oftentimes, specifically with archery and archers, we're all guilty of standing flat-footed on a 70-degree
absolutely.
night in our flip-flops, shooting at a freaking block target 30 yards away, right?
Yeah, I
And
love it.
that
I love it.
it's all fine and great. I do it with my neighbor all the time. But is that the best? Well, it depends what you're doing, right? But diversifying your shooting or your exercise or whatever it is you're doing to prepare for the season, makes you prepared for, because you can plan as much as you want. Every season brings its own share of new challenges, problems that you didn't foresee. Like you basically, to be a good hunter, you basically need to be a great problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically, you need to trust that you have the ability to survive any situation in the wild and figure out any situation with the quarry you're trying to kill to be successful. I mean, you're problem solving constantly. So teaching yourself how to solve tough problems throughout the entire year helps you gain confidence that you can do it when it's actually worth. I mean, that's if you look at the military, which you haven't experienced, I don't. That's what they're doing. Very, very, or like a fighter pilot. Most of the time, like there's pretty rare the circumstances they actually have to go use those things, that they're actually trying to prevent them. Like, we don't
Right.
want them to have to do that, because that means there's conflict, right?
Right.
But they're preparing their whole career to use that. They're preparing their mind and their body to face that, maybe that 1 or 2 or 6 situations that they're going to be in conflict, right?
Yeah, and the more solid you build that foundation over time, year after year, season after season, um, just the more capable you become, the more steady you become, the easier it is to solve those problems, even if you haven't seen, oh, this is a new unique problem I haven't necessarily seen, but I've seen others similar, right? And yeah, I think that, if we're going to the range and shooting off the bench with our rifle, which absolutely you should do, and there's value in that. But if that's the only way you shoot, and now you're going to go on a mountain hunt, and you know that you're going to be shooting potentially extreme up or down, hill shots and things like that, you really haven't trained to provide the best chance of success, right? Because all of a sudden you get there and you're like, oh man, what's my cut on this? Is my dope right for blah blah blah, or what's my wind call, or and so it's like, listen, every time I think I'm good shooting a bow, I go shoot a 3D course in the wind, and I realize I'm not very good, right? But once I take that humble pie, I'm like, okay, I realize that even if I could shoot, say, 100 yards on a static range on a calm day, my effective range, you know, mountain shots, windy conditions, blah blah blah, are 40, 50 yards with a broadhead. But now I understand that, and so I'm gonna get, as close as I can and understand what the wind drift of the setup is. It's stacking. I'm trying to stack as many odds in my favor as possible and control what I can control to go into a very dynamic, uncontrollable environment. If
Yeah,
that,
and
if that makes any sense.
specifically with shooting, because you and I have hunted together several times. One of the times we hunted was out in Hawaii,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh jeez.
fine. Should we go there?
Please no.
But one of the things that I think has helped the most of anything, other than maybe Joel Turner, in changing my whole like my success level with archery and bow hunting, is finding hunts with high opportunity that you can do in the off season, whether that be hogs or axis deer or whatever. I mean, you name it.
I think it's
Finding
huge.
Yes, and
Yep.
and like specifically with something like an axis deer that's a little bit more tricky than a hog. In terms of, oftentimes, especially in Hawaii, you're shooting in wind. You're shooting, you're hot, you're sunburned, you're tired, it's up and down, sideways, whatever. They're jumpy as shit. They have small vital zones, it seems like. So like you're getting a lot of opportunities, but not only that, you're doing it on something that's actually a really hard species,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
you're successful because most of the time, because there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
But I was telling somebody the other day, and you can find hunts like this, like I'm talking about, like in Texas, or like you don't have to go to Hawaii, and everybody wants to, not everybody can afford it. My point is like finding those opportunities where you can have just lots of opportunities to fail. If you can find those places, like, again, specifically with that example in Hawaii, where I find those, like, they're like a cross between a mule deer and an antelope, but you're getting, like, in a day of good axis deer hunting, you're getting years of experience in spot and stalking, years. Because even a good mule deer hunt, you might only get a couple really good stalks on good bucks, right?
Yeah.
And so if you add up, it takes 5 years to get 10 good stalks on an average mule deer hunt. Or like if you're a public land elk hunter and you're hunting over the counter units, and you get like a shot or a couple shots a year at branched antlered bulls, you're doing pretty good. Well, what if you could do that in 3 or 4 days, and like you have like 5 years of experience? those opportunities, or just go sitting in a ground blind in Texas and shooting whitetails or hogs, just so you're going through that process. You're going through that process. So when that 6-point bull comes by or whatever it is, that big whitetail you want to kill, you're like, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. Like it's just a total change in dynamic with your confidence.
Yeah, I don't think that can be overstated. I think that off season, practice, so to speak, or those off season hunts, um, you could go to Hawaii as an example and stalk axis deer for 4 days and never kill one and come out of there a hell of a lot better hunter than you went in, because
You might need a psychiatrist.
but for sure you'll need a psychiatrist, but like you said, like all the stalks you get on like really wary animals, and the shot opportunities where you're going through your process and like you're calming yourself down, and I don't care if it's a hog or going down to Texas and shooting cull deer or does or whatever the case may be. I went to Africa years ago for the very same reason. I'd read an article from Chuck Adams, and he's like, practice in the summer. And so you can go there and it's unbelievable. Like try to stalk those animals, and, but there's lots and lots of opportunity. And you just get better at that. But that's my point. Like there's no off season if you really, think about this as a lifestyle. It's all fun in my mind. You're all trying to get better. And then, when that great buck or bull or whatever the case may be comes by, you just have a lot better, you feel more confident, you have a lot better odds of success, because you've kind of stacked up those, you built that foundation and stacked up those reps under your belt. And you're like, yeah, I can do this. Like, yeah. And let's be honest, like a lot of hunting, especially archery hunting, like a lot of it is confidence, right? And when your confidence get dinged, like it's tough. Total archery challenges are amazing. And there's a lot more. Northwest Mountain Challenge. I mean, there's a bunch of 3D archery events in the summer, and like they're amazing. You get to go and shoot in front of people, so there's a little bit of pressure. A lot of them are very realistic scenarios, 3D targets, and they're just a blast to go and participate in. The other thing I like to do is, I mean, I was doing it here. I'll say it now because I don't need to go do it necessarily at the moment, but I'd buy one, like if I bought one 3D target, let's just say a deer, and then my buddy bought one, we would throw them in the back of the truck. We'd drive the local ski resort in the summer when it's Forest Service land, so it's open, and we would hike up, so we'd get a bit of a workout. We'd set the targets, and then we'd shoot them from a couple different angles and distances, and we'd go and we'd pull the targets and we move them to a different place. And so like that was just a cool, fun morning to go shoot and like get some great reps in on animal sized targets and the whole visualization part. To me, that's if I had to put everything aside and only break it out for the couple months that I hunt, like I don't know what I'd do with myself for the rest of the year. I don't know, maybe work more. I don't know.
Well, and I think I think planning and preparation is good for the mind. Like, there's plenty of bad stuff that happens throughout the year and in life. Like, there's plenty of that. We all know that. We all have problems, but I look at my hunting planning and preparation as a something positive that you can focus on, like a purpose outside of life's problems that you can focus on. It's like fun, man. Like, work sucks. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to go look at odds in frickin' Arizona and daydream about whatever. You can look at it as like it is a hobby for most people, like, but you can kind of spread your hobby into the rest of your year by simply, and what you're doing in the long run is it's all about odds, and nothing's going to be guaranteed no matter how much planning you do. In fact, it's not even close to that, but you can increase your odds to where over the course of time, statistically, you will be successful more often, which is what we all want. The average elk hunter kills a bull. Is it one every 10 years or something?
I think it's 7 years to kill their first or something like that. It's
okay.
not It's not a lot. I mean, it's between
it's pretty dire.
it's between 7 and 10 years. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if you're an average elk hunter or you're someone new that's getting into it, or even an experienced elk hunter that still only kills an elk every 2 or 3 years or whatever it might be, maybe you kill one every year. It doesn't really matter. You can even further increase your odds to be successful. Why wouldn't we all want to do that? I just think the problem is it takes discipline and upfront work without the results coming immediately, which is what we all want. So maybe you mix it with some of the sexy stuff. You can shoot your bow. That's sexy. That's fun. You get immediate results. But maybe like if you spend 20 minutes a night shooting your bow, maybe spend 20 minutes a night digging through your bins in your garage, just reorganizing, like making sure your survival kit's right or whatever, digging in some of these other areas that we've been talking about. I know that I'm guilty of that. Usually I get to some of this stuff like my bow's dialed, my body's dialed, my mind's dialed. I know where I'm going, but I get to the week before the season. I'm like, where's my goddamn headlamp? Where the hell did I put my headlamp?
Or when was the last time I turned the stove on? Your camp,
how much fuel do I have?
Your camp stove.
Shit, I got to order batteries. Stupid stuff that you could have taken care of months ago.
Yeah. But the interesting, David, is real quick is, you and I live in the environment where elk and mule deer live, right? So we're very fortunate. And so, I'm not sure about you right now. I don't think you live at, I live at say 5,000 feet. So I'm not sure where you live at the moment, but
500 feet. Yeah.
Okay. But my point is we live in the environment, we live around these animals and we're able to access their terrain and like even train in it if we want. And so, as more and more people from back east come out west, and they want to go to Colorado, which I highly recommend to go hunt elk, that you need to try to stack the odds as much in your favor as possible, right? And so that's where planning comes in. And so when you draw that tag, say to Colorado, or let's say that mule deer tag in Nevada or whatever, like that's when you need to, not only shoot the bow, not only physically train, not only do the e-scouting, but start to plan all these things. And maybe you need new gear or gear that's maybe specific to that particular hunt. And that's where the training really ramps up. And, people are, you don't want to waste all those vacation days and all that money and then be driven out of the mountains. And this has happened. I mean, not to me, but I've talked to so many people where this has happened and they're like, man, I got out of the truck, I put on the pack that I've trained with all year and I had no problem. And I was like crushing, 4-minute miles with my 45-pound pack. And I got out of the truck and I went up the trailhead, and half a mile up, I literally felt like crap. I couldn't breathe and I was home in 3 days. And I'm like, well, you didn't plan for the altitude. And they're like, what is that? That's a real thing. And so the more we can help people stack the odds in their favor through training and preparation, the better off, the more successful they're going to be, the happier they're going to be. And then they'll keep doing it, right? Because the risk is that people just say, you know what, this is too hard, I'm going to quit hunting. And then we're in a worse situation than we are if, there's, quote, too many hunters, right? Like, I don't think we've ever had that, that problem. And so, the more better prepared people are, the safer they're going to be and the more success they're going to find.
I think dudes just aren't very good at planning. I think it's something we struggle with, but at least I'm speaking for myself and a lot of other dudes. You're lucky, John, because you're like pretty meticulous and detail oriented.
Yeah. I mean, it's my mindset. Yeah. It's my personality.
But for those of you that are like me who struggle with that, you have to just really focus and do it earlier than ever. And it just makes your season so much easier. I'm still learning too, but you guys make sure to go out and, first of all, knowledge from the storms, right? .com. Or what's your website, John?
Yeah. knowledgefromstorms.com. And I also have
Knowledge from Storms.
And I also have a YouTube channel by the same name.
Okay.
Where I've been posting a lot more videos lately.
Okay. There's endless amounts of knowledge that we can all benefit from on his channels. Also, next week, watch out on outdoorclass.com for John's full course to come out. If you decide to sign up, help out the show, use my code altitude. You'll get 20% off at checkout. I hope you guys all check that out. I'm excited to see that come out. I think it's going to be awesome. And there's no better person to do it than you. So, and I appreciate you coming on today, John.
Well, I appreciate you being asked.
Many more of these.
Am I the first person? Am I your first return guest by chance?
I've only had a couple.
You've had a couple. Okay.
Yeah, I've only had a couple, but
I was wondering. There was a lot of pressure if I was going to be the first one. I don't need that type of pressure.
Yeah, and go check out the first. John was on like maybe in the first. I'm on episode. This will be episode, I don't know, in the mid 40s. But you were on like right around 10 or 12 or somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You guys should go check that out. We talked a lot about kind of broader stuff, life, John's history up in Alaska and cold weather training and all these things. So go check those out. And while you're at it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Altitude Show. I post all the interviews, full interviews, tons of clips. It helps us out. And, we appreciate you guys showing up. So thank you, John. Let's do this again.
Awesome. Thanks, David.